Far-right EDL founder Tommy Robinson.
Look what we've achieved in 6 months. We've gone from through the roof. Thanks to Elon Musk.
Conspiracy theorist Alex Jones.
It's exactly what the CIA wants, and it's a disaster.
And misogynist influencer Andrew Tate all have at least one thing in common. Reinstated by X or Twitter after free speech absolutist Elon Musk took ownership, they've gathered more followers than ever before. In Robinson's case, doubling. The violent riots after the Southport attack were fuelled, say the multiple police forces confronting them, by misinformation. False claims about the suspect's identity giving way to violent attacks on mosques, on minorities, on hotels housing asylum seekers. With social media companies under fire over the hate that spilled from their platforms and onto the street, we, along with a digital media expert from Northwestern University, have taken a forensic look at how inflammatory misinformation thrived in the aftermath of the Southport attack. For example, a small account that's since been locked makes a claim about an unrelated crime. It says a Somali couple have been arrested in connection with the murder of a woman called Anita Rose. In the following days, as the riots spread and far-right content rips across the internet, this claim was then amplified exponentially by an account called Europe Invasion, saying they were Somali immigrants. That gets more than 5 million views. When Suffolk police intervene via a local newspaper saying this is dangerous misinformation, that's seen by just a few thousand. Daniel Trilling is a far-right expert and says promoting misinformation and conspiracy is part of the business model of many platforms.
You know, these are money-making machines, or at least their owners would like them to be money-making machines, and they thrive off what's usually called engagement. And very often the lowest common denominator is for people to just post stuff that is obviously wrong or inflammatory or upsets people, because that gets a lot of replies. That's then rewarded by, often rewarded by the algorithms. But with Twitter, there's something kind of extra going on, which is the changes that Musk has made to the platform since he took it over have both added sort of extra dimensions of monetization and downgraded the controls and regulation that are there to regulate hate speech and misinformation and so on.
So you've been studying the far-right for 15 years. How have you seen them change in the way they operate?
So the big change in recent years is that individual far-right influencers have played much more of a significant role than sort of traditional formal political parties. It's very difficult for far-right activists and people who do believe in that kind of stuff to recruit people to their cause. You know, if they just go up to random members of the public in the street and say, you know, do you want to join my group or so on, they'd get rejected 99% of the time. So what they're always looking for are ways to radicalise themes that are there in mainstream politics and find the points where people are susceptible to misinformation.
On August the 3rd, the day of violent riots in Stoke, claims about 2 white men being stabbed by Muslim men circulated. Tommy Robinson tweeted 2 posts with videos, this one since deleted, that clocked up nearly 3 million impressions. That same day, Staffordshire Police confirmed on X that this wasn't true. There was no stabbing, but even so, this got a fraction of the views.
I think there's now a big constituency of people who, for various reasons, have gathered around different types of conspiracy theories and misinformation. You know, people who bought into COVID denialism, COVID conspiracy theories, people who've been very engaged by the rhetorical attacks on asylum hotels or on Muslim communities in the last few years. And then you've got these very prominent far-right influencers and other kind of grifters and other kind of misinformation factories that are really sitting atop all of that and exploiting it. And it's when all those things come together, you get this sort of explosion of lies and propaganda, basically.
It was in the hours after the Southport riot that saw more than 50 officers injured and a mosque surrounded and attacked that the term two-tier Keir emerged, at first getting 1,000 or so views. Within a week, though, it takes off exponentially, as adopted by Reform UK, and when Elon Musk tweets it himself, he gets nearly 4 million views within 8 hours, bringing the total at that point cumulatively to 30 million.
Are we going to end two-tier policing, sir?
The Met Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, has said officers have been put at risk by the, he said, serious voices amplifying accusations of police bias against white rioters.
So there's not two-tier policing? we cannot say those kinds of comments are simply not relevant right now. That is not correct. It is not correct.
And while politicians across the spectrum, including the former Home Secretary Priti Patel, dismiss it, the term has taken hold.
The idea of two-tier policing is not a new idea. That's been around on the far right for a number of years, related to the idea that migrants, Muslim communities, different faith or ethnic communities are unduly favoured in the legal system, policing, for example, and that relates to the idea that white people are perceived to be the victims of some kind of replacement or some kind of cultural erosion. That's not to say that everyone that shares that hashtag is necessarily understanding that what they're doing relates to an existing conspiracy theory, but that is the impact it's having on communities. And so you get this really difficult disconnect where we call it borderline content. It's not specifically illegal, it's not overtly hateful, but we know what it infers and the impact it has on communities. And we find that in the 10 days after the Southport attack, that hashtag was viewed over 100 million times.
We contacted X as well as other accounts mentioned in this report with no response. The EU has an ongoing case with X over measures to tackle disinformation. And last night, Commissioner Thierry Breton told Musk in a letter that in the context of events in the UK, he was compelled to remind him of his legal obligations. Musk's response? This Tropic Thunder meme saying, your own face. Musk's response regardless, a sign that those who accuse him of sacrificing truth or safety at the altar of engagement, in law or in letter, might simply for now be wasting their paper.
Amelia Jen with that special report. Well, joining me now is Nina Yankovic. She's the former executive director of the Disinformation Governance Board of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and now co-founder and CEO of the American Sunlight Project, an organization tackling disinformation. Thank you very much for coming on the program. Thanks for your patience. So Elon Musk, I would say, while creating all this trouble on this side of the pond, would say, I'm exercising my First Amendment rights of free speech, and what's the difference between me expressing my far-right opinions, you might call them moderate, on X, compared to Fox News, for instance, doing the same thing on TV?
Well, I think Musk is right about that. There's actually not much difference, except his megaphone is much, much larger and travels much farther than some Fox programs. And also, he's not subject, it seems, to the same rules that normal X users are subject to. A couple of weeks ago, before all of the horrible events in Southport, we saw him sharing a deepfake video that claimed to be Kamala Harris's new campaign ad, but it was actually deepfaked audio that he shared without any sort of notification to users about that. That actually goes against the platform's terms of service in two ways. But apparently, when you're the owner of the platform, you can do what you want, which is extremely troubling. And we know that when he amplifies claims of, disinformation, when he amplifies false rumors and things like this, that actually leads to offline violence in many cases. And so we do need some regulatory mechanism that can push back on his claims and keep him and his platform in line.
And is the really big difference here the size of his megaphone? The fact that he's got, 145 million followers, and X reaches millions upon millions of people around the planet?
Well, it's, I think, 194 now million followers and growing by the day. But also, he's empowered this extremely radicalized group of people on the platform, I would say. It's not just the likes of Alex Jones and others that he's reinstated to the platform, but the platform has materially changed since he took ownership of it. As someone who has received her fair share of online abuse and harassment myself, those things aren't getting actioned as much. And people who follow Musk feel empowered to harass, to threaten, because they know there's not going to be a consequence for them. So while Elon Musk might be able to share a silly meme and make a joke, that empowers the people who follow him, who are his acolytes, to do much worse. And then there's no consequence for that. And that's where we get into this accelerationist situation that's really, really troubling.
Well, he wasn't mincing his words today or his tweets today. He was telling the EU to basically F off. What can anyone, whether it's the EU or the US government, should they want to, or the UK government, do about Musk?
Well, I wouldn't hold your breath for the US government doing anything, certainly not in the next couple of months. We don't even have basic deepfake regulations on the books right now, which is kind of scary given the election that we're about to head into. I think the Online Safety Act in the United Kingdom is a good start. I think it needs to be constantly revamped and improved to reflect the new advances in technology that we're seeing and the ways that these platform owners are acting. In Australia, they've got an e-safety commission that has actually gone head-to-head with Musk several times, and they are able to impose fines on owners of platforms, much like the Online Safety Act does, in order to get them to fall in line. Now, I would encourage governments to make those fines large enough that they actually matter to these multi-billion-dollar corporations.
But can you envisage a world in which America does nothing about Musk, either because Trump is president or because of the power of First Amendment free speech rights, and then suddenly the UK, fearing what he might do online, will say, we're going to have to ban people from using X in this country, the way that they do in Iran, or in North Korea?
Well, certainly that's not something that I would condone. And we have seen other governments flirting with that idea. Russia, namely, has talked about banning platforms. I think any democratic government would be very unwise to consider something like that. But with the Online Safety Act, with the Digital Safety Act in the EU, we've got a number of regulations on the table, I think, that can patch together to make a regulatory framework that will work in lieu of the United States doing something. But I absolutely agree with the premise of the question, which is that the United States not acting to aim for transparency and oversight of these platforms that are headquartered in our country is a total dereliction of duty. And we need to step up, and I hope to see the next Congress do that.
And very briefly, do you think it's possible that we might see people just going off X, as some Labour MPs in this country have suggested, just boycotting it?
Well, I think we've seen a pretty big exodus of American users and then of many UK journalists over the past several weeks since the incident in Southport. And I think that is understandable. We're seeing them migrate to other platforms like Threads, and it'll be interesting to see if that holds for the next several weeks.
Nina Yankovic, thank you very much indeed.